And after 2 hours, I couldn't do it, and I had to go in today to City Hall to do it.
Oh, it does make me feel
Yes.
good.
Okay. It was so insane. It was like I needed to stop and then go to DeVry Institute of Technology. Do you remember those commercials that they used to have all the time for DeVry?
Yeah.
To learn how to be an IT expert, to then go back and learn how to go on their navigate through their website to do a $7 dog license.
See, this time I was able to renew my license plates and village sticker and everything online. Yeah. And my driver's license.
Hi, Rona.
Made me happy.
Hi, Lois.
Hi, Rabbi.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you guys. Or your avatars. Wow, it has a prompt here on this newer version. Ask all to unmute.
Oh.
That's an interesting prompt. Ask all to unmute. I wonder why you can't just. Right, but apparently there's situations where you want to ask everybody, but you don't want to just say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can just now you.
I think you have the ability to literally mute and unmute.
Yeah.
Everyone at.
Oh, I do, but there's an actual button. Ask all to unmute.
Oh. So you can have 14 people talking at once.
Right. Well, let's say you are trying
That's
to.
what you want.
You're trying to have
That's
that kind of a meeting.
Yes.
Right.
Apparently, but it's just why wouldn't you just be able to say, please unmute?
Yeah.
Right.
Without
And if
that
somebody
prompt.
wants to say something, they're going to unmute themselves anyway.
Because they're not really listening, but they might see it flash across their
I
screen.
see. There you go. There has to be a circumstance.
As somebody who's worked in radio his whole life, you quickly realize that people are only really listening with half an ear at best.
As somebody who's taught a lot of his life, I've experienced the same thing.
Exactly.
Even people speaking are only hearing with half their brain.
Yeah.
There's times where I realize my lips are moving and I'm going, how does it know what to say? Because my brain is not focused on what's coming out of my mouth. So how does it even know?
Exactly.
Okay, here we go. We're at the new book, the book of
remember, Gary is listening.
Deuteronomy. And our tonight's session is Le'ilui Nishmas. Gary, do you remember Gary's?
Gershom is him.
Yeah.
And his
Gershom or Gershon? Gershom. And any idea what his father's name was?
Moshe.
Gershom ben Moshe. Gary Goroff, who I got a chance to know, and was the husband of Liz and father of Moshe and Dara.
Also known as Chaya.
Also known as Chaya. Okay.
I just called in and she said she was prepared to come here tonight, but she'll see you tomorrow at the restaurant.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn. Okay, so this book that we are about to do is essentially a book of speeches. These are speeches that Moshe is giving shortly before he dies.
it's a reprise in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of it, a lot of it is a review, it's certainly at the beginning, but it's also a charge for the future. There's actually, I think, 3 different speeches. There's a Midrash in one of the collections of Midrash, the one that's most studied of the collections of Midrash, it's called Midrash Rabba. And there's a Midrash at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. I was studying it with a friend one time. And a lot of times when you're studying a Midrash, you're like, it's like a coded puzzle. All the words make sense as they're written, but there's all sorts of clues that there's really something else going on. And so when you're studying this kind of a Midrash, so you go through it and you start collecting what end up being various clues, and then you're trying to get to a deeper message. And there are some, you know, those magic eye puzzles where you open up, let's say, a page, and you have to look at it from a particular angle in a particular way, and then suddenly like a hologram appears. So and then when you see it, it's like, wow. So there are some times when you have that experience when you're working on a Midrash that you're collecting clues, etc., and then suddenly the hologram appears. And so on this one, we were studying it together, and then suddenly we realized what the underlying problem was of this Midrash, which is, where did this come from? Because look at all this. This is an entire book of words. Eila hadvarim, these are the words. This is an entire book of words from a man at the beginning of his leadership. He tells God he can't talk. We assumed that he had some kind of speech impediment. And he was very hesitant to take the role of leadership because he couldn't talk. And then suddenly, look at this. I mean, this, and it's not just the sum total of the words, that there's a lot of words, but also the quality. These are words spoken often by preachers as like the real critical lines of what it is that they're saying in order to move their congregations. And it's just breathtaking how much production is coming from Moshe, who at the beginning, so there are opinions given by different commentaries. There's some who suggest that over time, he just worked it through. And then by the time he's at the end of his leadership, this is what he's able to produce. There is a kind of deeper reading into when Moshe is talking about the fact that he has trouble speaking, that it wasn't so much that he had a speech defect, that he had a stutter, but rather when it said he was kvad peh, kvad lashon, that he was heavy of mouth, heavy of tongue, that what he was conveying was that he's not a schmoozer. He's not a schmoozer. And when God reassures him, when Hashem reassures him that it's going to be okay because Aaron will be your spokesman, that what Hashem's reassuring him about is, I just need you. I'm okay. I just need you for the heavy stuff. And Aaron will take care of the schmoozing. You know, if there's anybody that needs
Yeah.
Shmoozing, that'll be Aaron. He will be for you, a spokesman, means that when it comes time for that kind of talking, he'll take care of it.
So who
But
was schmoozing? Aaron and who else?
let's say
And
they're talking to the Egyptian leadership. So when you're doing politics, there's, the speeches that you're giving, there's what you say in front of the cameras, and then there's the schmoozing that goes on behind doors. And the schmoozing that goes on behind doors is often where breakthroughs happen. It's often where the real work of politics is happening. And so as a leader, he would be expected to be doing that, not just with foreign leadership, but also with his own people. He's got tribal leaders coming to him about different issues. He's got all this stuff going on. Leaders are expected to be able to manage the kinds of things that often require schmoozing. And so there is a sense from the Maharal that this was the thing he was saying, I can't do. I can't talk. Everything I say is heavy. By definition, there was a line from the movie The Freshman with Matthew Broderick and Marlon Brando, where Marlon Brando is in character as his persona from The Godfather. I love that movie. Yeah,
I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, it's just such a good movie. And so at one point, he says something. Matthew Broderick says, "Do you promise?" And Marlon Brando just looks him in the eye. By definition, anything I say is a promise. But lahavdil, but it's sort of like I can't say anything that's not heavy. To the point where obviously the extreme result of this is that when he speaks, even these speeches are Torah. They are Torah. How they're Torah is actually something that deserves lots of study and meditation, because it does not seem that he is reading a speech written by God. In the beginning, especially, he seems to bringing up personal stuff with him and the people. It doesn't. So if he was reading a speech written by God, then we don't have trouble thinking of it as Torah and having the same status as the rest of Torah. It doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be he's speaking from himself. If he's speaking from himself, how is this Torah in the same way that "and God said to Moses" is Torah, and God said to Moshe is Torah?
Is a conundrum.
So there is a part later on, towards the end of this book, where God says, I want you to write this stuff down. I want you to put it in the Torah. I want you to put it together with Torah. So you could say it's sort of like the Congressional Record. You can have things entered into the Congressional Record. They become the official Congressional Record once they're entered into it. And so you could say it's something like that. After all, we saw in the Torah portion of Chukas that they quote the minstrels, the Amorite minstrels. So, which, it's the equivalent of Bob Dylan. Yeah. And they're being quoted in the Torah. So you see the words of Balaam are being quoted in the Torah. The words of Pharaoh are being quoted in the Torah. The words of Dasan and Aviram are being quoted in the Torah. So just because material generates from a person doesn't mean that they wouldn't qualify as Torah. Somehow they become Torah. But it's a sort of mystery as to what you mean by that these words have the same gravitas. They have the same spiritual core as ideas such as "don't steal," which are coming from God directly from God. So in the past, on my journey of trying to understand things,
I love that journey.
yeah, which I get to share with you. I get to work out with you in a little workshop in these workshops. So I've talked with you about how I understand that primarily I'm a soul. Primarily, I'm a soul. Exactly how that works, what else am I, and how does it all work out? I'm still working through it. I'm at a pretty primitive level on this whole thing, beginner's level, but I recognize I'm a soul that's having an experience on this plane, which we could call this world. I'm a soul having experience on this plane. My body, somehow my body's part of a recipe. It does not seem like I'm exclusively a soul and that my body is merely a wrapper. Although sometimes it does, but it seems like my body has some part to play in it, but we'll call it a junior partner. And my body wasn't here, before I was born. I was just the soul, and after I die, I'm just going to be the soul again, at least temporarily. But while I'm here, I'm body and soul. I'm soul and body. So the way it seems is I have levels of consciousness, levels of conscious awareness. Even about very mundane things like my inner organs. I don't, like, if I think about my heart, I don't know my heart. I've never seen my heart really. I don't really know how it functions. I have a basic idea of how it functions, but I don't know my heart. I don't really know it. I don't know my lungs. I don't know the inner aspect of my person. No, even though they're so important to me. They're so important to me. And for the most part, I could care less. That's how I am about it. I could care less, even though they're absolutely vital, and if they slightly malfunction, it affects every aspect of being. I had a kidney stone. They're so tiny. They are so tiny. And then I can't even function. So imagine, I know how much they matter to quality of life here.
That's right.
But I have to be honest, I don't really know much about it, and I typically do not care that much about it. I go through life blissfully unaware until they call attention to themselves.
Right.
And then suddenly I hear about it, and usually it's somebody else who knows about them better than I do, who's telling me all about them. Right. A doctor ends up telling me about them, and probably not the whole thing, just as much as he feels I could understand, because he understands how woefully ignorant I am. So that's just the most mundane area of my existence, the most available. When I say mundane, I also mean the most available, the nature of the inner aspect of my body, and that's how little I know. Just imagine how much I don't know about my soul, about the spiritual essence of my being. So, but I've, with some mentoring, but also some inner experience of my person, Rav Dessler has an essay or two about what appears to be the paradox or contradiction between free will and the notion of determinism. Determinism means that everything had a cause. And if I knew enough about the causes, I would be able to predict where things are going, because everything has a cause. And so when we look at the world, it seems like that. Even weather, which we're open to the idea that there's much we don't know, and there are some aspects of it unpredictable, but we do see the more data they collect, the better they're getting at telling us about what's going to happen with the weather. So it does seem, when you look at the world, like everything has a cause, and if I could collect all that data, I would know with certainty what is going to happen. On the other hand, we're told that we have free will, which means that the free choice. So the way we understand that is, no matter what has happened up until now, I can choose between doing the right thing and the wrong thing. It is not predetermined what I will choose. And that's one of the great questions about free will. So as part of his treatment of this, he suggested that it's not just a philosophical kind of conundrum. It's also a clash of experience, that we have like an outer view of the world and we have an inner view of the world. And that this represents a clash between two ways of experiencing the world. We have the world as we experience it through our senses, and then it's that data is collated in our mind. It's processed in our mind. So that's one way of seeing things or understanding things. But there's another, what he calls an inner way. There's an inner way, and this inner way it's not merely intuition. It also gets filtered, through our mind. But it's just we have a capacity for understanding things with a separate mechanism, that inner mechanism. And so and we have experiences, and these experiences, again, we filter them through our mind, and they take on words, and that doesn't mean that we understood it properly. When I finally say the words, I'm trying to translate that inner experience, and I may not be good at translating it. I may not be great at articulating it, but I may even be mistranslating it. So I could come out with words, and those words really are more clues to what my experience was than really a final explanation. But so in that place, from that vantage point, which you could call that inner view, the context being from that inner place, we have every once in a while a sense of what the self is. Who is I, or what am I? Like a glimpse of it. So, and then we sort of work with our own inner experience, our own inner revelation, and the words that we find outside and mentoring from other people, and they say, oh, that's the soul, that, you know, what you experienced over there, you just had a moment, a true useful vision of yourself, as yourself. And so that, you know, that when I'm working on this exploration of who am I, or who is I, or what is I, so that's what I'm working with. I'm working with those kind of experiences, looking over, you know, at my mentors, or the texts that are mentoring me, the words spoken by other people, and trying to put something together, which may or not be useful, may or may not even be ultimately correct. But the mistake starts to happen when I'm processing it, and not when I'm experiencing it. And this is why, like, when you're talking about this with other people, especially when you're talking about things that you hold to be fundamentals, you have to be cautious, because the words that each person is saying might clash, but that doesn't mean the experiences do. In other words, we both may have experienced something, and if we would just not talk about it, we could share it. The problem is we insist on talking about it and processing it and filtering it and doing all these other things. So now it sounds like we're diametrically opposed to each other about something that we feel so deeply about. And I remember I had this conversation. I accidentally became the teacher of a group of people who all belonged to the Jewish Reconstructionist JRC congregation. These were women who had formed their own Torah study group. At some point, they decided they wanted somebody to be the teacher of the group, and they were looking for a teacher. I happened to be teaching another Torah class that Lois was a part of, I didn't know what, but one of these people came to that class afterwards. She said they want me to be the teacher of that class. So the thing is that the Reconstructionist movement, it's the basis of its theology includes tenets which Maimonides would call heretical. So one example is that there was nobody in the group when we met. There was nobody in the group who had ever met anybody, or at least had a conversation with anybody, who believed in the notion of Torah at Sinai, revelation of Torah at Sinai. But I think the most pronounced one is the notion of a personal God, of a personal God. That in its tenet, this doesn't mean that the typical person that belongs to a Reconstructionist synagogue actually believed in the tenets of the Reconstructionist movement. They may be there for all different reasons, but at its, if you looked at the basic theology represented in the Reconstructionist synagogue, they don't accept the notion of a personal God. So, I mean, you cannot get, that's right at the absolute core of everybody's list of things that are non-negotiable, when it comes to faith. And so you would think that it would be a non-starter to study together. So I felt like I needed to address that at the beginning of our time together, which ended up lasting for many years and turned into a couple other classes and continues to this day, in one form or another. But and I said that what we're talking about now, which is a lot of times it's the final words, the product of all that making of sausage that happens from deep, heartfelt experience through the processor and out as a product with our words, that oftentimes it's in the end of that process that we find ourselves in disagreement, but not at the beginning. In other words, when it comes to what for tonight we're calling the inner experience, I trust that we are not far from each other, but and so we'll have a few ground rules, we'll take the text at its word, and a couple other ground rules, which everybody was fine with. And I didn't think we would have a problem. We never did. We never had a problem. And I think this is the case with almost every deep life experience, that if we allow ourselves to share it before the words emerge, that they're very close to each other and oftentimes in the same place. It's just once it's going through this processor. Now, I don't know what to make of the processor. I'm going to say that the processor is the body. That most of it's the body. I'm going to say it does a lot of good work. It's hugely important for our lives now, but it's got its limitations. And there are a lot of ideas that it just doesn't do well with. And if I know that, I don't expect a great deal from it. I need it to function. I need it to live. And even when I'm approaching spiritual subjects, I'm using it all the time. It's just that I have to use it with the understanding that it has its limitations, and I shouldn't take the results too seriously. I have to work with them as best I can, but I shouldn't take them too seriously. And if I see there's a problem, that's probably where the problem happened, which is with the processing. And I have to be open to that and allow myself to sort of go back to the part before words. Now, that's me, when I produce speech. There is a kind of speech that is higher. And that speech it also has limitations, but that speech is of a quality that almost makes it something different than speech. That speech is what we read in the Torah. When we're reading speech in the Torah, we're reading speech that it has, since if a human being is saying it, from the perspective, if it's coming from bottom up, so a human being is generating it, so there are still limitations on what it can represent, but the difference between that speech and my speech is it's almost unrecognizable as speech. That's how we treat Torah. That's what we're saying about Torah. So it's still of this world. And because it's of this world, it has the limitations of this world. But it can be looked at from all different directions, and it's just filled and filled and filled with more information and more information and more information, and not just information, but it's almost like you could plug it into yourself and it could power you. You could plug it into yourself and it could power your spirit. Lahavdil elef alfei avdalos, to make 1,000,000 separations. But there are times in history where somebody has set a line and it moved millions. It didn't, the line itself moved millions. And that's just almost like a metaphor for what it is that I'm talking about. But this is how we understand Torah. When we say something is Torah, we don't just mean it's information. We mean it is it can actually move you, and not just move you as a human being, but it can move your spirit. And that, like, it got plugged into you, and somehow now it's animating. That's how far it goes.
It's processing.
Right. But it's like, imagine you could it's like a chip you could plug into yourself. Right.
A little SIM card.
Right. Something that you could, and you see, like, there's a practice in the Muslim movement. They had this practice called hisbonenus. They continue to have this practice, but it was something that was very much practiced by the Muslim masters, which hisbonenus, which is a kind of meditation where you just go over the words and over the words and over the words. You say it over and over and over. It could be a phrase, from Tanakh. It could be a phrase from Pirkei Avot. But you take the phrase and you just say it over and over and over. Ein od milvado. There is nothing besides him. There's nothing besides God. You would just say it over and over and over and over, and it's not an idea anymore, but you absorb it, and suddenly you're seeing the world from a different perspective, from a different place. So that there is that notion of Torah. The other, there's another perspective of Torah, which is that it is something from outside. It's like in 2001 Space Odyssey, where the aliens planted a seed. And out of that monolith, or whatever it was that they plant, with the wisdom of man, comes the wisdom of mankind. So that the Torah is from somewhere else. That when we call it Matan Torah, when we call it a gift of Torah, it sort of means that. It's like that Midrash where the angels are asking God, what did you just, why would you give Torah to humans? It makes it sound like Torah was outside. And it was in this certain realm. And then at one point there was a decision to just give it to humans. It's like from this outer alien external sphere comes this something, and it gets now plugged into humankind through the Jewish people, and that's also, a true expression. There's many. There's one notion that everything we know and everything that exists, including us, began as Torah. That we emerge from Torah. So in this vision, like Histakel ba'oraisa ubara alma, God looked into the Torah and created the world. It says in the Zohar and mystical writings, God looked into the Torah and he created the world, which means the world comes out of Torah. So in that way, each one of these perspectives are just one facet of this, But from that perspective, everything that emerges is Torah. How is it that a minstrel from an Amorite minstrel says words that become Torah? How is it that Balaam says words that become Torah? How is it Dasan and Abiram say words? How is it that Cain says words that are Torah? Because everything that's coming forward is Torah. It's all Torah, because there's nothing that isn't Torah, because all of creation comes out of Torah. Everything is Torah.
Yes, we are. Nobody saw him come back tomorrow.
When you're learning Torah, let's say you had a fine Jewish textual upbringing. You had the best available. So you're being schooled, your parents are telling you about Torah before you go to school, then you go to school, and in school your teachers are talking to you about Torah, and a lot of your day is filled focusing on Torah, and you're a student that's really applied themselves trying to absorb as much Torah as possible. You could come to a conclusion that you are reading a book about other people that are not like you. Depending on the teachers, but a lot of teachers would give you that impression that you're reading a book about people that are not like you. You're never going to be Moshe. There never was and there never will be another prophet like Moshe. But not just that he is such an elevated human being that you're never going to be a Moshe.
Sure.
That's right. You're never going to be an Abraham. That is part of the instruction. I received this instruction, and I know a lot of other people received this instruction, and there's reason to have it. It's certainly the result is a necessary kind of humility when approaching what you're reading about these people or from these people. And that is true from one perspective. That is true if you're looking at it from one perspective. That you're reading, like, don't try this at home. This is professionals working on a closed track. Do not try this at home. Don't think that you're just going to do X, Y, Z, and then suddenly the Red Sea is going to split.
It's not
This is not for you. Just read about it, know that it happened, but don't think this kind of stuff's going to ever happen to you. And again, it's useful to have that kind of humility. But there's a completely another part of the perspective that you are Torah. Your life is Torah. Everything that's happening to you is Torah, and that all of this is about you. All of this is about you. It's all about how you work. It's all about everything here is instructive. See how he prayed over here? Try it. See how they did that over there? Try that. Right? These aren't distant Mount Everests of
Right.
human history. These are
Things you can
they're for
practice.
you.
Yeah.
This book was written for you because it's the manual of you. It's the manual of you because you yourself are Torah. Your life is as much Torah
I'm in
as
so much trouble with me.
your life. The story of your life is as much Torah. You know, like if you ask somebody, yeah, imagine you bumped into somebody and they told you they're going to Rome, and what they're excited about going to Rome is they want to meet Romans because they've read about Romans, they read Roman history, and they want to meet Romans. People like
They're going to be surprised.
Marcus Aurelius, they want to meet the people like that. So they're just going to wander around Rome, and they're going to bump into other versions of Marcus Aurelius. That's what the person's saying. So you might caution them and say, well, Rome had a fascinating and glorious history. The Romans, they're not the same Romans. What if somebody says, I'm going to go to Athens? I'm going to go to Greece. I'm going to go from town to town, and I'm going to meet the likes of Aristotle and Socrates. And somebody might caution them and say, again, they had a moment in history, but when you're bumping into those, to the typical person in Greece, you're not bumping into those people. So now, what if somebody said they want to meet a Jew?
I'd be really surprised these days.
But there are people. What if they said to you they want to meet a Jew because they've studied the history of the Jewish people and they want to meet a Jew? So you would not be wrong to say that if you bump into a Jew, you are bumping into the people of the Bible. The truth is, when you bump into, it can get deeper, it can get broader than that. But at least when we're talking about that, you are bumping into the people of the Bible. You are. When they meet a Jew, they are bumping into. We are the most recent incarnation of the Jewish people, but we are every much as the Jewish people as they were in every generation, in every single generation, in every iteration.
Does that apply to us?
All of us. When they meet you, they are meeting the Jewish people. And it's no different if they met a Jew from 500 years ago, if they met a Jew from 1,000 years ago, if they met a Jew from 3,300 years ago. It doesn't make a difference. When they're bumping into those people, they are bumping into the same thing. They are meeting a member of the people of Israel. They're meeting a Jewish person. I'm just taking this a few steps farther, and I'm suggesting that every one of our lives, and this is not simply just true of a Jew, but for our purposes, we're talking about it. Every one of our lives is Torah. It is Torah. It's not less Torah than somebody's life mentioned in the Torah.
Because we're Jewish?
Because you're a creation. It's even broader. Because he stuck up our rice up our army. He looked into the Torah and created the universe. You are also Torah. We began with this notion, how could some words that originate inside of Moshe, that seem to be about Moshe, how could they be Torah? And I'm suggesting to you that the end of this conversation would bring you, or maybe not the end, maybe just a little bit farther along in this conversation, will bring you to a notion that your thoughts are Torah, your actions are Torah, your words are Torah. How to interpret those words and how to understand them You know, just because we say them, do we understand them? Do we understand the significance of them? But they are Torah. And we are every much an expression of Torah as the characters represented in the Torah. Our lives, the book of our lives would be Torah. You know, if it could be written from this perspective, it would be Torah. The book of our words would be Torah. That's just a thought. I'm just
Interesting
saying.
thought.
Just saying. Okay, I am grateful for this opportunity to share with you this
Can I
evening.
take this? What is that?
I would be so grateful if you took that.
Can I take the whole stack of them?
I would be grateful if you took the whole stack of them. Thank you very much. I look forward to learning together. We will not be learning together next week because next week Tisha B'Av is going to be concluding.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So we will not be meeting next week. But I am very grateful that we had this opportunity to meet tonight.
Oh, that's this week.
Be well,
Oh,
guys.
boy. Well, I'll still see you on Shabbat Friday, right?